We can't give from an empty cup. Like if somebody else is wanting something from you and your cup is empty, you have nothing to pour from. It's self-love. Self-care is really self-love. And unless we are giving to ourselves, we have nothing to give to someone else. We're mirrors of one another, and we reflect back to that other person, whatever's going on within them.
Most people don't stay in their 9 to 5 because they're comfortable. They stay because they're unsure what they do, unsure if they could replace their income, unsure of even where to start. Today's guest has made her mission to change that. LuRae Lumpkin went from leading global teams across 100 countries to helping professionals build independent businesses and income, and designing a life that actually makes you want to wake up to it. This conversation isn't about quitting your job tomorrow. It's about understanding where your real leverage is and how to start building freedom on your terms. Welcome to Executive Connect, LuRae.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I want to talk about this idea of the hidden risk of a stable job. I know I've always been someone who used to think of that myself. And I know you've said the riskiest strategy today isn't replacing your single paycheck. It's relying on that single paycheck too much. Why do so many people still believe the opposite?
I think people have a natural tendency to keep their heads down, and the way life is structured, it's so busy. People are busy taking care of kids, getting to work, making sure everything is done, the laundry, the food is purchased, and the thought of adding one more thing onto their plate to have to look up and say, what else would I do if I didn't do this routine that I'm in? If I didn't do this job, if I didn't follow this path, what would I do is just too much for people. Unfortunately, that is a very narrow view of the world that, people, even though it's uncomfortable, they really need to start opening their eyes a little bit because there's a tsunami coming, whether they're aware of it or not.
And I was just about to ask you that question. What has changed in the workforce that most people haven't caught on to yet?
Yeah, I think if we look at the number, there are 2 million jobs in the US alone that have gone away since 2024. And the layoffs are continuing to come. I just saw an article in Business Insider where, Meta and another company where they're changing the titles of what they're calling the roles. And while AI obviously is the elephant in the room, and people are honestly training AI. The more they get up to speed, they're training AI to take their job, basically. And so I actually just went through the exercise of working with AI to predict what are the new roles that are going to come out in the future, like 97 million new roles that will be created because AI is completely changing the workforce. And I think you couple that with the fact that they're burned out. They're tired of being, I think, disrespected in some cases, being work environments that aren't conducive to their growth, or in toxic work environments. That I've never seen LinkedIn so barraged with people talking about it. I think it's great because people aren't hiding the fact that a lot of these work environments, I now say that I've been out for 10 years, human resources, you think about that like gold as a resource or silver as a resource, but a human as a resource, like all of the vernacular. I kept my last employee review just so I could see the craziness of the words that we use in even performance reviews. Like performance, I think, is like you go to a circus or you go to a performer, like a musician, but it's like, did you meet my expectations or were you below my expectations? I mean, even that is so condescending to us as a human being.
Ready to lead smarter and invest wiser? On the Executive Connect podcast, we unpack executive strategies for wealth and influence. Hit the subscribe button now. Don't just watch, act. Yeah, I would agree with that. I find that really funny that you should bring that up. I laugh. I had reported to somebody who didn't like to give exceeds his expectations. And he did it across the board for all of his staff. And so you were really never able to exceed his expectations. But when you look at it from an HR desk, if you're not exceeding expectations, you're not getting pay raises. So it is actually kind of offensive, that, and I would agree with you. And so what signals should people watch for inside their current roles? And maybe how should people rethink this risk of a potential loss of their career?
Yeah, well, I think that the one exclamation point on all of this is I wrote about this yesterday actually, that employers will, well, back up. An employee will give 2 weeks' notice. An employer has been known to let people go or lay them off or announce a restructure. Today's your last day via text, via Zoom, via email, a pop-up invite from HR on your calendar. That's like a red flag. Oh, something's coming down the pike. Sometimes companies, they're legally required to give notice if it affects a significant number of people in the workforce on their staff. But they're smart also in that they will break up the layoffs into smaller numbers and do it in waves. That way, there's no public announcement of it, yet 30,000 people just lost their job, for example. And it happened over a series of 6 months, so it was not something that raised a flag, with any kind of announcement to whatever governmental agency they need to make an announcement.
Yeah, and it's so true. I didn't think of it that way, because a lot of times I know the actual number for these layoffs because I've like this plus this plus this equals the total number. And it's so spot on that we don't often think of that. And so I want to talk a little bit about your career and maybe, the moment that changed everything for you. You've had a very successful corporate career. What made you kind of do that introspective work and step back and realize that you wanted something completely different?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think when the first time I stepped out, I mean, I had worked my way up to the VP of marketing for the small business division in the telecom industry, which was what I aspired to be, a VP of marketing, when I graduated from college. And I got there and was so, I guess, unenamored by what that role really was. And I remember vividly sitting in my office working on salary treatment for people and realizing that I wanted to give some of the directors like 10% bumps in salary because they had done such an amazing job, in my view, of that. And I remember someone knocking on the door, coming in and saying, oh, by the way, you have 3% that has to go across the team. So I'm like, okay, that means some people if I want to give 10%, that means somebody else gets nothing. And I still am not getting, had the ability to give 10%. So that was kind of a wake up call at that point. So I remember I was a single mom at that point with 2 young daughters and a mortgage. And I had elderly parents that I was also helping care for. So I was like a sandwich, child, mother. And so I planned for about 6 years to make my exit. I was like a senior manager at the time. I really knew I wanted to get out of the work I was in because I was getting siloed. And it really wasn't something I saw myself doing for the long term, even though back at that point in time, you could get early retirement. If you'd been with a company, I was there almost 16 years. I was close enough that I would have qualified, because I had just started right out of college. So, that was kind of a turning point of, oh, this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. So that's the first time I went out on my own, and I kind of went in and out of corporate roles. I wound up at the very end of the time I was in my corporate journey. I wound up in New York City working for the largest media buying agency, and I literally had like a mini health scare. I got sick. And it wasn't really a sickness, but I got a cut on my wrist that traveled from my hand to my wrist, and I wound up going out on short-term disability and had to have wrist surgery because the antibiotics they gave me caused tendon tears. So an antibiotic dose of antibiotics wound up throwing me out to the point that I was on the phone with a therapist in a parking lot of a Whole Foods talking about, well, I'm going back to, because I had left New York to be by my daughters while I had wrist surgery. And I said, well, I'm going to go back and interview with the other big three, because I was with the largest media buying firm in the world, right, in New York City. And she said, slow down. She said, take your time. You weren't happy when we first met each other back in January, and I had then moved back to New York the second time. So that was kind of the final, I would say the final straw, the final window of time where I really stepped back and said, what do I really want to be doing? And I didn't have it all figured out. I just knew I couldn't do that anymore.
And I think there's so much to take away from that. First of all, taking that step and choosing you is, there's a lot of fears that come up for people when they kind of take a step back, leave their corporate career. And so what advice would you give someone that's kind of in this same moment in deciding, do I stay at the company? Do I leave the company? And they're caught up in all this fear and can I do it? Can I make it? Will I afford my bills? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say, and I've put a bunch of things together now that are like free things for people to use as kind of a guide to ask the right questions. So, first it's just asking yourself, what do I really want to be doing? Like if I weren't to, if I weren't going to be paid for something and I just get lost in it because I love it that much, that's probably a sign that there's something there, either even as a hobby, something that can like divert some of the stress you're dealing with your current job while you're figuring out what you want to do. But start now. Start while you're still in the role. Get a side hustle started. Like start looking at, what you like to do, what people would pay you for, what do people come for advice to you for? Like, those are indicators of areas that you could turn that into something that people will pay you for. I'll say the one thing people underestimate, we have so many skills and so many things we know how to do that we assume, oh, everybody knows how to do that. And everybody doesn't know how to do that. So whether it's someone who's a great project manager who's also great at organizing, maybe they become like an organizer, like a feng shui closet organizer. People will pay money for people to come in and organize their homes, organize things for them. But that's just a mini example. It could be someone who loves writing and they're spending more of their time like in meetings and doing things that isn't really what they love to do. So there are a lot of things that people just step back and look at, what do I really love to do? Because a lot of times people will get started down a path in their career doing something because mom and dad wanted them to do it. It was pressure from their friends. And once just the reality is the inertia of the way this world is set up, once you get down a path and you've gone to school and you're in a job, you're on this, like, I call it the conveyor belt of life. And so to get off that conveyor belt, we have to interject something new into the flow and give yourself permission to look. I had a good friend in New York who used to say to me when I would get, because I went through my own anxiousness when I had just made the decision to step out. He said, oh, you can always go back and, get another. And he was like, go back in the ad industry and get another job. And I said, don't even leave that option. Don't even say that, because I don't want that to even be in my periphery as an option. I stepped out. I'm done. So I'm going to figure this out, one way or the other. I will figure this out.
Money Ripples is on a mission to help professionals like you get their money working harder. Their clients free up an average of $35,000 their first year without having to work extra hours. To show you how, they've put together a powerful training called Cash Flow Secrets. And as a listener of the Executive Connect podcast, you can get it completely free. Just visit moneyripples.com/secrets and enter the promo code EXEC. Yeah, it is so true. I think I hear this. I've spoke hundreds of times in front of, younger generations and mentored younger leaders. And one of the things I say, when you go from career to career, job to job, you don't leave those skill sets with your employer. You take them with you, and you're a good organizer, you're a good traveler, you're a good juggler. Those are really important skills. And it's funny because I took it for granted myself. I was a professional traveler, and what I realized was so intuitive for me, took me no time to really plan, was just a lot to do for some other people that never travel for a living. And so you're so true. So for someone that's kind of struggling right now, or they feel stuck and kind of struck in this analysis paralysis place, where should they begin? So like you said, they should write down kind of, I'm a good organizer, I'm good at these, and really getting a list of things they enjoy doing. Is that your kind of step one?
Yeah, and I think for if someone is really thinking about, I'm going to step out because I'm just tired of working for other people. I want more freedom. I want more autonomy. I want to remove that income cap. I mean, people don't realize and I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to touch on this while we're here. When you step out and are self-employed, you pay yourself first, subtract all your business expenses, and then you pay taxes on what's left over. When you're an employee, it's the opposite. They take everything out and you're left with whatever's left. And then you go at the end of the year and kind of fight back to get a return back from money they already took that probably shouldn't have been taken because it was too much or whatever. But you don't get to write things off that you can when you're a business owner. So one of the things I put together, because through my own journey of becoming, I've been now on my own like 11, going on, it will be 11 years in October, is
Wow.
that people thinking about what it is, what kind of a lifestyle do you want? Like, what do you want your life to look like? That needs to be one of the first things you think about, and then build your work around that.
Mm.
I was living the life of, okay, where's the job? Where's my commute? I had an hour commute at one point. I was in Seattle and I had an hour commute over a bridge, one way, like morning and night. So 2 hours plus a day. I was just commuting to get somewhere to make a paycheck and get back home to my young daughter. And, it was just madness. So then I looked at other things, and as I was exploring different options, like, for example, I'll use drop shipping. Someone can be like, "Oh, I'm going to start selling stuff," right? Okay, well, then you're tied down to, depending on what kind of a system you have, either you're mailing it yourself or you're working with Amazon or whatever, but you're dealing with customer service and returns, so that's a whole experience. Some people love that. Someone else may say, we've all seen the vloggers, like, the travel vlogger who's like living. I actually have a couple friends who are like modern day nomads and, have gone one way ticket to Bali and then, oh, now I'm going to Brazil and, I'm in Colombia or I'm in Brazil, whatever, traveling the globe. But the point is we have to really think about, what do we want our day to look like? And where would you like to live? Like, I grew up in rural Minnesota. And so my dream at 13, at the point that I realized Southern California existed, I'm like, how did I wind up here? I should have been there. And how do I get there? So when I was 18, I packed my car and waved bye, mom and dad. And I drove to the West Coast to go to school. And so everything is a choice. But I mean, I've lived in the Caribbean, I've lived in Hawaii, I've lived in San Diego and Seattle and Phoenix and, New York City. Like, life is a journey. It's not meant to be, in my estimation, my humble estimation, not meant to be lived in one. Some people love that one place, and that's what you do. You just plant your roots and you stay there. I've been more of a free spirit, so I've experienced living different places. And so going back to the question, there is a free downloadable, kind of solo business questions to ask yourself. Like, what kind of lifestyle do I want? Like, do I, exactly to the point, do I want to sell things? Do I want to sell my knowledge? Do I, what do I want? Do I want to build something, create something, create a product, that maybe it's a tech product. And then you go down the list of, your pricing, and do you want a team? Do you want to be a solopreneur? Do you want to grow? And then have to deal with employees. Like I've been in both. I've had startups where I had a team in Poland. I literally had co-founders in Poland because I got, $250,000 from Entrepreneur Magazine on their season 2 of Elevator Pitch. And so, I had like global responsibility, but in the end, that isn't where I ultimately wanted to be. So, now I'll say footloose, fancy free. I can work from anywhere, literally. I mean, even though I produce multiple podcasts and I ghostwrite for people, but I can do that from different places. I don't have to be in one location to make, I mean, seriously, if I did the hourly, which now I say you work for 30 years and people pay you for 30 minutes to do something that took you 30 years to learn how to do. Like I can work, very less and make as much or more than I did before, just because I'm self-employed and I have autonomy of where I do that.
And I love you brought that up because I think that's a great segue. When people leave the W-2 and they become an entrepreneur, I think they often underestimate that jump. When you've spent most of your career as a W-2 employee, things that you have taken for granted, like HR and marketing and other, different divisions, you are now a team of one. And so what I found with several of my entrepreneur friends is they burnt out quick in becoming an entrepreneur. So how do you suggest people build income without burning out in the process?
So the one thing I would say is, as I had said before, like start something to test it out and get your feet wet while you're still employed, and you'll get a little bit of money set aside, but outsource anything you don't like to do. I mean, there are so many. Now we are a global citizenship. So, I mean, there are resources around the globe that you can, everything from having them do your commenting if you don't feel like you want to do it yourself. And I know people that do that, like even on their LinkedIn or their social media, or post for you a fraction of the cost of, for example, of having someone maybe in the US do it. But think about the things that you really love to do and the things you don't like to do. Find a way to outsource it. And even as an entrepreneur, there are a lot of times you can do trade where you're not necessarily having to pay for everything. For example, you could have an accountant that manages your books for you, and you in exchange do some marketing for them to help them get the word out that they exist, right? So, but I think there's so many tools now that are available. Like I've used QuickBooks for years, and it's so simple, and people can pay you, right through the internet. They can send you a check. They can do a bank transfer. I mean, it doesn't matter, whatever. They even have bookkeeping. I at one point did a capital loan through them, which, just for cash flow as I was starting out, and, paid it back within that window of 6 months or a year or whatever it was. So I think really sticking to what you love to do and then outsourcing everything else. Because, there are people, I get approached all the time. Someone's wanting to build me a new website. I'm like, I'm a marketer, so I can do that pretty quickly and easily myself. I have multiple sites. So, that's not, but for someone who's not, there's so many options that are great, and even like strikingly.com, lovable.com, I think it's lovable.com, where they will through AI, through simple language, create a beautiful site for you within an hour or less.
Yep, so true. And I think there's all these things that get lost in our brain, our subconscious, the questions that actually hold us back from doing the things we want to do. Like you were saying, I don't want to work 8 to 5 anymore. I'm a night owl. I want to work noon to whatever. And I don't want to, have a desk. I want to work in my, pajamas, whatever those things are. But I think most people say, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I'm not as smart as you. you have more resources, or whatever the questions are that we say to ourselves. How do you reframe that? And how did you reframe that for yourself?
Well, I mean, something that just I remembered too is I have something I put together. It's called the Business Startup Blueprint. And so it's free and it just walks you through. These are all the things that I'm thinking of, even like little, technical things like an EIN number, like setting that up. So, which for anybody who's listening, is like it's an ID number that is not your social security number, so that you keep your business separate. When, as far as income, that allows you to open a bank account, for example, that's under the business name, and then you can get an LLC. So it's not necessarily tied directly to you and your personal, you as a person. So I think, people just need to just start somewhere. Like I said, get the blueprint. That was literally, I think I wrote that like 5 years ago, because I put myself in the shoes of someone who I was blessed to be working in the startup space from early in my career. So I, at one point, gave $100,000 away to 10 deserving small businesses. I had a $2 million budget to spend launching a home office consulting center. So it was for startups, right? And so I thought, giving some seed funding to startups would be great. I was working with Entrepreneur and Success magazine at the time, doing events, across our 14 states that I was then working within. And then I put 100,000 aside to give away to people, and one of them was actually adoption.com that got funding, which then got picked up by the Wall Street Journal, and they wound up being one of the largest adoption sites. And they just prayed they were legit. I know they were, because they were two young guys who had gone on a student exchange to a foreign country, and they saw all of the, the need that was there. And then people who were not able to have children, who really it was such a great service. So it's really just rolling up your sleeves and looking for resources that can help you jumpstart fast track your learning. Don't try to just figure it out on your own. I was paid to learn how businesses start. So that was like such a blessing. And then it came full circle with Entrepreneur giving me money, after I had left my last corporate role. It just came back around, twice and a half the amount that I had given to other startups along the way. So just start and take a baby step.
This episode is brought to you by Summit Ventures. If you're an accredited investor, Summit gives you access to one of the greatest tax advantage opportunities: direct ownership in oil and gas. Their projects deliver what they call the triple play: cash flow, equity growth, and powerful tax benefits. And here's the best part: these investments qualify for 1031 exchanges. That means you can roll gains from real estate into energy while deferring capital gains. To learn more and get a free white paper, Oil and Gas Demystified, just visit www.summitven.com/executive connect. And I love that you said that, because I think I wrote my book in my early 20s and I didn't publish it till my 40s. So 20 years of those kind of questions. And to your point, just start. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how same with this podcast. I talked about this podcast 10 years ago about doing, some podcasting, some speaking before podcasting was even around. And I think the reason that I actually ended up doing both of those things was because I stopped asking the questions and I just took the step, and I had a support system behind me that said, Melissa, you're just talking to people. What are you overthinking? I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. I could edit it. And so I think that the mindset shift is really important. And like you said, taking that first step without having all the perfect answers and knowing what to do next. And so I want to talk about you talk about choosing what you work on, choosing where you work, where you show up. And you've actually done it by the way that you have explained to us just now. Now, how do you create those boundaries when you're kind of working through your life? So, what boundaries are required to do this?
Well, I would say like I was just thinking yesterday there's a criteria that I had at the point because I had my own agency. So I have a digital agency. So I do, create websites and help people. I create other podcasts and ghostwrite for people. And but there have been instances. My criteria is if a company is out to make the world a better place, that is one of the criteria that I use. So there was an instance that, that it's just an example of it only happened once, but I had started on the path working with someone, and it wasn't a fit. And I refunded their money. I put a certified check in the mail and said, I gave them whatever the work I had done. They got it for free. And I just said, I wish you all the best because I'm not going to work with someone who's not in alignment. I'm very much like a people person. I mean, I had HR at one point in one of my last corporate roles come and say, what are you doing? You have the highest retention, the highest engagement rates of the whole company. I said, well, we get together and I ask, what do they need? What do they want? And this is like pre-COVID. So people were telling me, we want to be able to work from home some. And, we like to celebrate birthdays. And, so they do like long birthday lunches. They could work from home, just make sure people know where you are. And we started optional, I started de-stress Fridays. So optional meditation on Friday afternoons in the large conference room. So my team was coming and then I had people from other groups coming to ask, is it okay if we come in and join? And it was just like, we all just closed our eyes and I had music that was, like a guided music and people, just went within and grounded themselves because corporate environments don't encourage that. I mean, it's like churn and burn, where's the report? When's it going to be done? You're on an action plan, whatever the latest chaos of the day. So, yeah. So I think it's really being true to yourself. And when you're doing your own work and you're defining what you do and kind of what's the criteria for the people you want to work with, like who's your ideal customer profile, which a lot of people have that ICP. Once you define who that is, then that's kind of the first step. And then you can still screen from there. And if someone doesn't fit, you nicely say, I don't think it's a fit. And you move on and then you can say no. Like, I probably say no to more just because at this point, I'm choosing selectively who I work with. Right. So it's not like, come one, come all. No, we have to be a mutual fit. And, I love the people that I work with. I mean, they become like literally become friends to a certain extent. So on in a different way. So
Yeah, and it's so true. I think like most of my career, there weren't boundaries in place in my roles. If I had a seat at the table, I was expected to work nights, weekends, right off maternity leave, get right back into it, no time to slow down. And so, when I think about the word boundaries, I think to your point, you have a lot more ability to have those boundaries and work with a client
right,
of clients that are high vibe or your vibe or whatever the vibe is
right,
when you work for yourself. Like I've worked with a
right,
lot of colleagues that were very low vibe, negative, the world's coming
right,
in to an end tomorrow. And I remember every time I'd leave meetings, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so depressed. And so, to
right.
your point, sending that check back to a client that wasn't in alignment with who you were is
Exactly.
such a powerful,
Yes.
freedom to have. And so, what are some of these trade offs that come with having the freedom?
I mean, something that's coming to mind, which doesn't directly answer your question, but it's also something you go through. I remember being so conditioned to be productive, to be working, that I felt guilty if I wasn't behind my laptop, like, got to do something, like do the client work first. Don't, so I remember one of the, don't go do something fun for yourself, God forbid. So I remember one of the first times that on a Monday, I went to the beach with the dog. It was a Monday morning, hadn't done one bit of work. And it was the most liberating feeling. And then I came back and I was like, I was inspired to, what am I creating today? Like, what am I working? Obviously, I know what I'm working on, but I think for me, I'm like almost an anti-calendar girl at this point, because my schedule used to be like, I mean, I flew to Singapore, for God's sake, within, was told, oh, we need you in Singapore. Like 2 days later, I'm like on a red eye flying to Singapore with a meeting the next day at 8:30 in the morning. I mean, I did not own my calendar. So, like, I do have structure where, I know, okay, these are the times that I do these certain things, but to not have a packed calendar has been like the biggest blessing of it all. So I think setting like those boundaries in terms of anti things as well, like, what am I not going to do? I'm not going to fill my calendar. I'm not going to say yes to everything. I'm not going to go to every networking event I'm invited to. Like, I say no probably more than I say yes, because I really want quality, not quantity.
I love that. And I absolutely agree. I think who we surround ourselves with and who we work with is either increasing our life, moving in a direction with joy and positivity, or it's either bringing us down. And so, really creating that momentum that lasts has to do with who's around us. And I know you've built platforms and programs. And so, what separates the people that follow through from those who don't?
Yeah, I think, people, to your point, the people around you have a big influence on whether you stick with something and go forward. I mean, I think of my father early in my career, and my parents both had eighth grade educations. Like, their parents immigrated from Europe. So, but no one in my family, like, I was the first one to graduate from high school and college, right? My siblings didn't even do that. And so my father was like, oh, you should just be a secretary. Why are you going to school? I said, Dad, I'm going to have a secretary. I'm not going to be one. And he couldn't see that. And I said, one day I'm going to be making whatever the number was. I threw that out to him. Dad, one day I'm going to be making. He just looked at me and he's like, only the best people get the good jobs. And I was like, I'm one of the best people. So I remember waiting to that point, and I had far surpassed that dollar amount, that I had said to him. And I think it's like my parents were so proud of me, because, I had surpassed anything they could even envision achieving, or someone, in their lineage. They used to laugh and say all the brains went to me. I was the last of five. But I think it's like the people you surround yourself with makes all the difference of what's possible. Both my daughters are entrepreneurs. Like, neither of them went the corporate route. And I just both have told them, be happy. Well, do something that is something you are going to like to do. Don't just do something because I did it. Like, don't follow in my shoes steps, or whatever people will say. So I think the people around you have such an effect on what is possible. And that saying of like the five closest people to you, I say it's even less than that. Very closest people to you will determine the trajectory that you go. So surround yourself with people that you aspire to be like, or are uplifting, or at least supportive. I'm open to feedback, and I try to, get the ego out of the way. So I just told a colleague yesterday that I said, just don't sugarcoat it. What do you see? Tell me. And I'd rather hear that, but it's from someone I trust. So if they have good intentions, they're supportive of the vision and the dream you have. If they're not, then I would minimize and step back, let them go figure life out. But yeah, negativity will just bring you down. So stick with those who are at least doing something that is positive, or are encouraging of you doing something positive.
And it's a funny thing. The environment plays such an important role of our happiness. It didn't occur to me until I became a remote employee in 2016 that I was unhappy with my work environment because I was around and sitting near and close to a lot of either negative people or in a negative environment. And I'm in a very positive, very authentic kind of gal. And it wasn't until I went home that I realized that. And kind of second to your point, I didn't realize that I was feeling guilty by not working and working and working until I was tired. And what happened for me, the second piece of that is when I went home and I was working from my own home, I was so much more productive that I just kept working and working and working because people weren't in my office bothering me. And so accountability is a really important trait. But if you are already an accountable kind of person, it's easy to become that entrepreneur because you're able to create consistency regularly versus having consistency come from systems that are from something inside the company that you're working for. So one of the things that's been really helpful for me is I'm somebody that's really consistent with the things that I enjoy the most, whether it be exercise or podcast. But that's what gave me my momentum was this consistency, the accountability. And so I was able to kind of gain momentum because of that. And so I want to get your thoughts on how do you sustain this long-term growth?
I mean, I couldn't believe myself that it's going to be 11 years in October. I mean, it's just
Wow.
and it has been, I would say it's been so much fun because like even now, to a certain extent, I'm engaging in the AI wave in a way to help and empower other people. So I just did you know, looking at the future of opportunities with AI. Yeah, a lot of jobs will be going away, but a lot of new ones will be created. So I think I'm continuing to work on things and I became a breathwork facilitator for God's sake. Like I'm into health. I'm into wellness. I go to an infrared sauna. I have an unlimited, I can go every day of the week. Infrared sauna with breath work at 170 degrees. Like I think I'm almost at 600 sessions. It's, since like 2022. So the things that are really, sustaining and give back to us. Like I'm a big meditator. I've been to 3 Dr. Joe Dispenza retreats in the last year. I mean, I didn't even realize it was 3 until I looked back. I was like, oh my gosh. So, really taking care of ourselves, which doesn't get encouraged. I mean, I remember being so burned out and, walking from the bathroom back to my office in New York the second time I'd moved back and asking myself, when's my sentence going to be up? And I remember thinking, no one does anything forever. So like, when is this going to end? And I was like, it's going to end when I make the decision that I'm going to do something different. That's when it's going to end. And so, I mean, I won't even disclose my age, but it's like, as I'm approaching, like, I don't say like retirement is not even a thing. Like I have books that I'm writing. I'm writing a nonprofit dog book right now for people who can't afford dog food and vet bills. Written from a dog's point of view. So, that will be, it will be coming out hopefully before the holidays this year. I started writing it a while ago. So it's like a passion project, but it's like, we get to do those things I'm also writing a book about healing your inner child because a lot of the barriers that people have stepping out into their own business, feeling that they're worthy of making more money than they're making comes from, where did you get that belief you weren't good enough? Where did you
Mm.
get the belief that I'm not enough? Like, yes, you are. You're perfect, complete, and whole, just the way you are. I mean, until people get to that truth, we'll stay stuck where we're at. So yeah, I have a shadow work bundle that I created too, because unless you engage and reconnect yourself with your wholeness, we have this, unfortunately, that conveyor belt of life. Those first 7 years, we're taking in everything. We don't have a way to discern or filter, or was that true or was that not true? And things can be said or things can be done, and we think, oh, that's that's what I'm worth, or that's my reality. No, that's not. That's something that happened to you, something was said to you. That's not who you are. So, yeah.
And I love that you said that because I think who told us that? Well, in my case, it was teachers that told me I wasn't smart enough, or bosses that told me I was too young or too blonde, or I wore lipstick, or I'm a female. And so I think it's all around all of us. None of us get out of life without these people speaking into our lives. I've had people tell me I'm not a good boss, but then you ask my employees, they loved working for me. And the ones that didn't were the ones that were the whiners, moaners, complainers that wanted to do half the effort or half the work. And so I think we have to ask and listen to the people around us. But you said something really, really important. And as women, I find that having this relationship with self, it is okay to go to the beach and take your dog. It is okay to take an hour lunch to do something for you, to care for you. And I know that I have put a strong practice in place to advocate for myself and to not only in the workforce, but in my home for my children to say, okay, I need a little bit of a break and I'm going to go do this thing for me. And that doesn't mean I'm selfish. That just means I value my relationship with myself and I need time to rest and recoup. And so I think you're so spot on with all of that.
Yep. Yep. We can't give from an empty cup. Like if somebody else is wanting something from you and your cup is empty, you have nothing to pour from. So it's self-love. Self-care is really self-love. And unless we are giving to ourselves, we have nothing to give to someone else. I mean, we're mirrors of one another, and we reflect back to that other person, whatever's going on within them. So, if people around you are saying, oh, I love being around you, or it's the opposite, like, oh no, there they come again. It's like, it's time to look within and just do some work, do let go of stuff and be around people that are going to be uplifting. We don't have to punish ourselves to be, I mean, even when it comes to family, it doesn't just because, there's the family you choose and then there's the family that you're biologically born into. So, just be smart about how you spend your time. Life is fleeting. Like this isn't a dress rehearsal. This is the real deal. This is it.
Yeah, and it's compressing and it's moving faster and faster. And it's funny, some of my best girlfriends I met accidentally, and a couple of them are 20, 30 years older than me, and they could be, a grandparent to me. And so, or a mother to me. And so I agree with you. I think, today we've talked about a lot of things, but freedom doesn't start when everything's figured out. It starts when you decide to move, and you remind us that income independence isn't about escaping the work, but it's about choosing it. And the sooner you start, the more options you create for your own financial future. So I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing all your knowledge and your authentic self with our listeners. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Executive Connect podcast, please share it with someone who's about to make their next move. And for more conversations on wealth leadership and building your own financial freedom, subscribe to YouTube and your favorite podcast. Thanks again for being with us today, LuRae.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was so fun.